As we approach 2027 general election, Arise News anchor and presenter El-rufai, that is always on fire, has advised and cautioned President Bola Ahmed Tinubu against the forthcoming election. Because as it is now, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is thinking that 2027 will be Uhuru, a walkover, a free way for him to walk straight to his second term, since there is no viable opposition that is willing, formidable, and that has one house to combat or restore power with him, because he is using the likes of Wike and others to destabilize the PDP and in the Labour Party, allegedly. Note, allegedly. Leads to what El-rufai, that's always on fire, said, and his advice to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu.
Former governor of Kaduna State, Malam Nasir El-Rufai, says the relationship between President Bola Tinubu and the North has deteriorated less than 2 years into his administration, warning that he may be given the Goodluck Jonathan treatment ahead of the 2027 elections. El-Rufai made the statement in a post on his verified X handle yesterday titled 2027 Southwest Tinubu's Supporters Playing with Fire, Part 1. The former governor's comments came as the national chairman of the All Progressives Congress, Dr. Abdullahi Ganduje, yesterday urged Northerners nursing presidential ambitions in 2027 to bury the idea, insisting that Tinubu would serve his statutory 2 terms. El-Rufai had been attacking the ruling APC and the policies of the Tinubu government, even as political gladiators across party lines continued to mull the idea of floating a coalition capable of defeating APC. El-Rufai recalled that during the 2019 party primaries, he saw the way APC handled the primaries and wrote that if the party was not careful, it could go the way of the People's Democratic Party, which lost power after 16 years. He said he predicted that if APC did not return to its promised progressive path and ideology, but stayed obsessed with just winning elections at all costs, just like PDP, the ruling party could lose power at the federal level by 2031. Well, back in the news again is...
He never left, actually.
He never left.
He's been in the news in the last few days.
Since last week,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Ayo, your take on this weird, almost 2 years to the date to the next election,
Right,
and things are already this heated.
All right, so it was about this time 2 years ago when we were preparing for the general elections, if you recall, February 2023. And then, of course, it was May 29, 2023 that this administration came into power formally. And let me go back to former governor of Kaduna State, who has had a lot to get off his chest in the last few days, especially through his ex-post. I think he's Nigeria's own Trump, has the opportunity to just speak a lot on his social media platforms. I think if I want to summarize his speech, which interestingly starts with an admonition from the Bible, that is that, what's the admonition now? That it's too early. I'll get there. I'll get the quote. It's just skipping my mind now. No, when I saw it, I thought that's quite interesting. It was saying that it was important. So it's titled Southwest Tinubu's Supporters Playing with Fire. That it is part of his speech. Now I remember. Sorry, I was trying to gather my thoughts. Was about it's a child that one loves that you correct, okay, and that that you chastise. And the Bible says that it's whom God loves that He chastises. So he used that admonition, but he actually started by saying that it was too early to begin to talk about elections in 2020 for 2027, but because of the urgency of the matter beforehand, and because he loved the APC so much and he didn't want his party to lose, he had to come out and speak about it very quickly. The summary of my own summary of what he says is that don't take the North for granted. North is still the kingmaker. In fact, the last part of what I said, he actually used those words and said that the lesson that President Tinubu should learn from former President Jonathan is the fact that the same mistake that President Goodluck Jonathan made was that he took the North for granted. He thought that they were very powerful in the South, and by ignoring and offending the North, and I paraphrase that, he lost that election. And he doesn't want the same fate to befall President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and then goes on to say a number of things. Now, is he correct with regards to not taking the North for granted? Perhaps, of course. I mean, in many countries around the world, there are stronghold regions. There are places where if you want to win an election, you have to be very intentional because of many factors, largely because of the population. And, you know, this, you can tie this with the call for creation of new states, because a lot of people have often said that it is, when we come to population mapping, it is skewed in favor of the North. But we cannot deny the fact that when we come to population, the North is important. And so that's what he was trying to drive home. Now, what are the agitations? In recent times, you've heard, you know, talks around, oh, the president's appointment hasn't really favored the North. The president has been quite, you know, South-driven in his appointment. He hasn't done a lot of work. And if you want to look at the merit of that, it's not actually, you know, fully true. If you look at the activities and his appointments, many of them have reflected the North. I mean, the Chief of Defense Staff is from the North, and we've also had people who, we've also had interventions. In fact, and I'll wrap up very shortly, the First Lady has often gone to the North through her Renewed Hope initiative to give, you know, to that part of the country. But it feels like they are not satisfied, they are not happy yet with what is going on. If the president must win the election, there are a lot of factors against him at this point, and I end here. Number one is a coalition that is being formed. There are talks with Atiku going around and talking to different people. Number two is this North agitation. He has to face that and see what he can do in the interim. Number three is if other strongholds, you know, emerge in the next few days or months, you know, to challenge his candidature. But I think, I mean, there's some merit to what El-Rufai said, but I also think it's also time for us to begin to review the fact that the North is not the only region in Nigeria. There are other regions that make up the nation that also determine, if they come together, who emerges as president.
So the truth is, what he's saying is something we should take seriously. And even more seriously because he mentioned the Jonathan treatment. And we all know the Jonathan treatment. What was the Jonathan treatment? A lot of people felt that Jonathan violated certain agreements because he was not supposed to come back for a second term. He said he was going to do one term. And the PDP had internal crisis and the North went against them. So pretty much that's the thrust of the conversation. And he kept on warning that we'll be like the PDP if we don't check our internal mechanisms. The question a lot of people have asked, like Boala we had here yesterday, will always ask El-Rufai, is the fact that if you were in government, if they passed your security clearance, would you still say all of this? But let's also forget that a couple of people have pivoted out of the APC, the likes of Saliu Lukman, El-Rufai, and this...
He's still in the APC.
I mean, pivoted in the sense that out of this government.
Okay.
Saliu Lukman has been a firm critic of this government. He's been calling for coalitions of other political parties that they can actually do it. El-Rufai says he's still in the APC, but there are political talks here and there. And he has been criticizing this government big time. The truth has to be said. The North has a very big voting bloc. We can't deny that fact. In fact, after every election result, when you bring in what I call the Kardashian states, the KKK states, when those numbers come in, Katsina, Kano, Kaduna, those numbers are really huge, and they make the difference. And this El-Rufai was a fundamental factor in winning those areas before, in the last election. Because we remember the work he did for Tinubu. In fact, we remember the controversy around it then when people were saying, was he going to support Tinubu or not? And finally got the support. Even when they had the Naira crisis, it was one of those that stood with Tinubu and all of that. So everybody thought it was a given, I was going to serve in this cabinet. But what happened, happened. We've also heard a lot of discordant tunes out of the North. People are disgruntled and everything. I mean, take, for instance, the interview we had with Additional. After the announcement, Daily Trust carried it. The League of Northern Democrats did come out firmly. And I was at the party in Abidjan when I saw the likes of Shekarawu and all of that, a couple of other people there. So I'm not surprised that the League of Northern Democrats are saying, if he comes out, we'll support him. That's another political dynamics. Also, attaching with the political dynamics of Atiku Abubakar going to see Olusegun Obasanjo, my sources now tell me that that meeting was 100% political. And in fact, there were conversations made about concessions on who is probably going to take a VP role. So with all of this brewing, President Tinubu needs to watch it strongly. What is the counter-argument in favor of President Tinubu? A lot of his supporters say, he's a master strategist. Yes. Just like how a lot of people in Aso Rock supported other candidates, nobody gave Tinubu a chance to emerge in this last election, but he had played all of them and he played his game right. Last minute, he made those consolidations. A lot of people felt people within the villa tilted more towards Atiku Abubakar and other candidates. So If that same northern base that came through for Tinubu, because Tinubu lost Lagos in the last election, he lost his base and all of that, he didn't do too well in a couple of other areas in the south, but when he came to the north, he consolidated his vote. If his major base that voted for him are talking like this, then he should take it strongly. What have been the arguments? The arguments have been, yes, he's been nepotistic in nature. They've said, oh, in fact, they don't even say he gave positions to people in the south. They say he gave it to the Lagos boys. That's the argument. In fact, somebody was telling me the other day as regards, Kayode Okpei. I go, oh, railway. Somebody would have thought you should have gone to the north or something. Then he's gone to another Lagos boy, as it were. But that doesn't shroud Kayode Okpei's competence. In all of this, what should he do? Tinubu needs to reach out. He's been doing a lot. I mean, there was a couple of, overtures being made, like you said, about his wife and all of that. But he also needs to reach out. But a lot of people are also confident that Tinubu is a master strategist. He's going to bring the North in before the election. He's going to consolidate his base, that other people are just talking. And the fact that most of the other political parties are not settled. In fact, you want to run an election in 2027, you are talking about a coalition, but people have not agreed. Obi wants to run, Atiku wants to run, Saraki wants to run, everybody wants to run. But Tinubu is the only constant factor here because he's incumbent.
All right, there's so much to take away and to unpack, but very quickly, I'll just focus on the things that really stood out to me. And to me, one of the major talking points was the fact that the conversation around zoning, as much as, yes, we are, both of these individuals affirmed that the zoning does need to stay in the south and it needs northern support. However, the spirit behind zoning is being deeply eroded. And that's because it's not a constitutional requirement. So for me, this conversation raised the question, is it time for us to constitutionalize the zoning formula? If you look back to the spirit that we had at the Lapal House when this was first conceptualized, and of course, yes, the military governments also had their own formula for power sharing and zoning. However, a lot of these dynamics are now at play because the zoning is a gentleman's agreement, yet there are few gentlemen in politics. Now, when we look at this and we unpack deeper what former Governor El-Rufai was saying, and he was saying, don't mess with the North, don't mess with the North. It also seems that it may play into the very same geopolitical and tribal politics that he is chastising in his statement. So we have to be careful about that. Now, when we look deeper into this issue and we look at the Goodluck Jonathan factor, as it is being called, or what happened in that election, we also need to remember that the dynamics and the demographics in Nigeria have also evolved drastically, even though it's been a short period of time. We know that in the 2023 election, for the first time, many young people voted. So that shifted the dynamics. That's how we saw the movement called the Obedient Movement coming, and we saw a new energy to elections that we hadn't seen before. So I think we also need to be careful about focusing entirely on the legacy politics of saying that it's the North and the North, and make the mistake of possibly ignoring stronger groups or groups that can contend with the hegemony of the North when it comes to the outcome of elections in Nigeria, that are emerging and that are solidifying and coming together. Yes, we've already spoken about the issue of coalition and so forth. Just yesterday, we were speaking to the spokesperson of the Labour Party on Newsday, that's Mr. Arabambi, and he was saying that Labour Party is not going into coalition with anybody and has endorsed Peter Obi as their candidate. And we asked them, so what will happen? Because all the other candidates are speaking of a coalition. Again, it comes down to the fact that Nigerian politics is a zero-sum game. Winner takes all. So it's now a competition of egos. As egos decide who is going to take the ticket, who will be the flag bearer, will they actually agree? Or will we end up in another situation, just like 2023, where the division of the opposition ultimately allows President Tinubu to continue for another term? So yes, it's important for us to remember the role that the North has played traditionally and in the legacy of politics, but it's also important for us to take a fresh analysis of how the dynamics of the new demographics of Nigeria now stand and how those can easily tip things in anybody's favor if the right dynamic does not come to play.
The president must not be carried away. Before I mention El-Rufai, Rufai of Arise News, his words is intact and in order. He is doing the APC and the president lots of good for sharing these critical views for this opinion that he's sharing. Many parties have lots of dislike for Rufai, but of course that has not stopped him from being who he is and for consistently sharing his views on matters that are of importance to this government and the nation's growth at large.